Welcome back, everyone. Hi, if you're new, I'm Tori, and today we are going to be getting into all of my spoiler-free thoughts on The Strength of the Few by James Islington. I am so excited for this video, you guys. I just honestly cannot believe we're finally here. I read The Will of the Many last year, absolutely loved everything about it, loved that just wild ending that we got, and I remember thinking at the time, it's criminal that we have to wait so long for the sequel to come out. Like, what am I gonna do in the meantime? And now time has just gone by so fast that we're finally at the release date. It's no exaggeration to say that this was one of the biggest anticipated releases for 2025. Definitely one of my biggest anticipated releases coming into the year. And you guys, I am so excited to tell you that this lives up to the expectations. It lives up to the hype. This is a worthy sequel. It's a strong sequel. But also in the video, we're going to get into some things that I'm not as like over the moon about. So we're going to talk about all of it. Again, this is going to be entirely spoiler free for this book, but I am going to reference things that happened at the end of The Will of the Many. So if you don't want to be spoiled for that, maybe don't watch this video. I know there are some people out there who like to watch sequel reviews without reading the first book. I'm not going to stop you from living your life, but I am going to be talking about The Will of the Many a little bit in this video as well. Before we jump in, I just want to give a really huge shout out to Saga Press. I did receive an early copy of this book and I am just so grateful. I was so excited to receive that arc, and I did read the book a couple of months ago. There's a lot that I want to get into in this video, guys, but the short of it is that The Strength of the Few is a very strong follow-up to The Will of the Many. And honestly, I can't imagine if you just absolutely love The Will of the Many, or even if you just overall enjoy The Will of the Many, I can't picture a world in which you go into this sequel and you're just like, yeah, this didn't do it for me. Like, what is James Islington up to? This kind of missed the mark. He dropped the ball. I just don't see that happening. So yeah, I hope you guys can go out and get your hands on this really incredible sequel, and I hope you enjoy this video. Let's get into it. I think the best place to start is really just to help set you guys' expectations for The Strength of the Few. I mentioned in the intro that this is a really, really strong sequel. At the same time, this is also a really, really ambitious sequel, and I feel like I can't stress that enough. It is really ambitious, and we're getting so much in this book that it is impressive with how Islington is able to, juggle all of these disparate narrative threads and all these new characters, and how Will is expanding and all of that. So I was really impressed with that. At the same time, though, as you start to get kind of like into the middle of this book, you do start to feel like the book is not entirely immune from some of the growing pains that comes with it being a sequel. This book absolutely in no way suffers from second book syndrome. But again, I think as you start to get settled into the book and get settled into the new world and these new characters, it starts to kind of get to a point where you're like, whoa, let's calm down a little bit. Like, let me catch up, let me catch my breath. And I think because of just the sheer amount of things that are going on in this new book, it doesn't always, like at every single point in the story, feel like this smooth explanation, this smooth journey. You're just kind of like, wait, what is going on? This conversation just went over my head. So it's kind of like those feelings when you start to get into the middle of the book. But overall, I do think it starts to smooth itself out as you get into the later half of the book, and then of course to the ending, and we get set up really, really nicely for the third book in the series. So if you remember the ending for The Will of the Many, you remember that this was copied, and now there's like 3 different versions of this. So we get that in book 1, and now coming into this sequel, that is a tall order to live up to and to kind of expand on that. And so there's a lot of changes in this book, a lot of good changes in this book happening, I should say. Now the structure is different. So instead of one perspective that we get over the course of The Will of the Many, now this is a multi-POV story. And now we're getting new worlds, new cultures that are not just inspired by the ancient Rome setting that we got in the first book. So that's actually one of my favorite parts of The Strength of the Few, and just an area where I think Islington really, really shines with building up these new worlds. And along with that comes a huge cast of new characters that we get. Our knowledge of Will and what it can do and its limitations, all of that starts to grow in The Strength of the Few as well. And I really love those aspects of the book. I think coming out of The Will of the Many, we still had a somewhat limited perspective on what Will was really capable of, just how in general like characters could be using it in different ways. And so Strength of the Few touches on that heavily. We get a lot of focus on Will in this book, and I think seeing the growth of that over the course of this sequel is also one of the best parts of this of the sequel. So The Will of the Many ended with that jaw-dropping final couple of pages that we got, and The Strength of the Few page 1 picks up immediately after that last scene that we got. I appreciate that we just kind of got thrown right into the action. I think it just creates some incredible momentum for this book, and it's a momentum that sustains itself for a long time. Like I would say at least midway through the book, because again, we're getting those different perspectives now. We're getting these different worlds in The Strength of the Few, and there's a lot of time that's spent, you know, carefully building up these worlds, building up the individual issues that exist in these worlds. So you're spending a good chunk of this book just really trying to get acclimated to the large cast of new characters, you know, get comfortable with the new settings and the new terms and just all of that going on. So I think another strong element of this book is the political intrigue. It is so much stronger than it was in book 1. I wouldn't really call like the first book like a deeply political intrigue type of story. So in The Strength of the Few, the political intrigue in the Katzinen Republic is really ramped up. And we start to see that happening a lot in this book because Vis is in a different position than he was when we saw him at the academy. And so now he has just really been thrust into Katzinen and hierarchy politics. And there are just so many moments when he's like speaking to characters and you are just kind of on the edge of your seat because you just don't know who to trust. You don't really know what their motivations are and what some of these characters are working towards. So I think it does create a really good sense of tension as Vis is kind of maneuvering all of the politics and meeting all of these really powerful characters over the course of this book. Another thing I love about The Strength of the Few is when you're reading this, you truly feel like it's building towards something. You read some sequels and it just feels very meandering and you're like, okay, where is this going? And you're not sure if you can really trust the author or if the author even really knows what they're doing. When you're reading this, you get the sense that James Islington knows what he's doing. And I think a lot of that trust too was built up because of the Lycanius trilogy. I did recently finish that series a couple of months ago with The Light of All That Falls. So I am very aware that Islington loves his puzzles and complex plots and just, you know, loves having all of these big narrative threads up in the air that he's juggling. And so from reading that series and seeing the way that Islington was just really able to nail the ending for the Lycanius trilogy, he's earned my full trust. And coming into this series and reading this book in particular, that trust feels even stronger because there is so much going on. And sometimes you're not like always 100% sure like the importance of something, or you have just so many questions. I was just reading this and thinking, you know, Islington, wherever you want to take me, just take me. And I do feel like this sequel is going to be a perfect bridge between book 1 and whatever is going to be book 3 down the line. I don't know if it's too early to call this, but I think book 3, okay, well also book 4, which I think is going to be the ending, I'm expecting that to be phenomenal too, but book 3, just from what we got in this and the way that this sets up the next book, I think book 3 is going to be the best in the series at the time when it comes out. So I'm really excited for that, and I just cannot wait to see where this series continues to go. I think Islington just laid the groundwork incredibly well in The Will of the Many, and The Strength of the Few comes in, stands on that groundwork, stands on the foundation, and just blows this world wide open. I mentioned this before, but I'm just so impressed with like Islington's stories overall and just what he's doing in the fantasy space at the moment. I think it's really incredible. I love how The Will of the Many just kind of feels like this simple story in a lot of ways, gets entirely flipped on its head and is now growing into something that I just really couldn't even imagine. I think more than anything, I'm just loving the experience of reading this series and the overall journey of this series. It is really something special. One thing though that I wasn't the biggest fan of in this sequel, and I think what's kind of keeping me from just, you know, I'm like a few steps away from being like, this was phenomenal, such an incredible, like best sequel I've ever read in my life. One thing that is keeping me from saying that at this moment are the new characters, or even just the characters in general. I don't want to just say a blanket statement like, oh, the characters are this, that, or the other. I think because there is so much going on in this second book, and because there is such a large cast of new characters that we're introduced to in this sequel, I can definitely forgive certain things when it comes to these characters. I do, however, think by the time you get to the end of this book, I was still wanting a little bit more from the secondary characters. I love this. I've loved this from the first book. I think this has such a powerful journey in this book, and you just see this getting stronger and stronger. You see him hearkening back to a lot of the things that his father taught him growing up, and you see him, reminiscing about his time on Seuss, and just, really pulling in things from his life and his childhood and the teachings that he grew up on, and that really fuels him over the course of this book. So let's get that out the way first. I love this. I think this is such a perfect main character for this story. However, I think the secondary characters in certain ways are not always strong enough to support a character like this. And so again, by the time we got to the end of this book, I was still like wishing we had gotten a little bit more depth, just a little bit more oomph from a lot of the secondary characters. Not only that, the characters that are returning from the first book, from the Will of the Many, I love those characters, and I wanted to see them also do a little bit more in the sequel. I don't know. I don't really know how to say it. I don't think the phrase like fighting for page time is the best example, but it's kind of the one that's stuck in my head right now. They're not like fighting for page time, because I do think there's an equal balance of the perspectives. But I still wish the characters that we already knew from the first book who made it into this one, I do wish that, I don't know, that they had just felt a little bit bigger than they were in the sequel. So, you have them coming back, and now you have this big new cast that's kind of bumping up against them. So I do think in a lot of ways, because the plot is so big and the problem is growing and the will is growing and the settings are growing, all of that, I do think in a lot of ways the characters sometimes felt like they were taking a back seat in a lot of ways. So I can't wait to see like the characters that we did get to meet for the first time in this book, how that carries over into book 3 and just how they continue to make an impact on the story. But overall, as I finish this book, I do just wish that the secondary characters had a little bit more depth to them. So that's probably my biggest complaint about this sequel. So overall, you guys, I think The Strength of the Few is a sequel that is well worth the wait. And this is a series that just feels like it is continuing to get better and better. And I cannot wait for book 3. The ending for this, there's another kind of jaw-dropping ending, but it's jaw-dropping in a different way. It's not, I feel like the Will of the Many's ending was like, wait, what? And this ending is more, at least in my opinion, it's more like, oh my God. So there's a lot of things going on in this book that just lead to this really explosive climactic ending. I love where this series is headed. I love how this book just really continues to build, strongly build on the key pieces and the foundation that we got in The Will of the Many. So I love this, guys. Go pick this up. I hope you enjoy The Strength of the Few as much as I did, and I hope it's going to be well worth the wait for you. So that's it for me, you guys. Thank you all so much for watching this video. I really appreciate it. Let me know down in the comments if you already have your hands on this book, if you've pre-ordered it, if you plan on picking it up. I want to hear about it. Or if you've read it already, let me know down in the comments. I would love to chat about it with you, completely spoiler free, of course. But thank you guys again. I will see you in the next video. But until then, take care.